The choked gurgle hit Jack Mercer first, the sound of a dog drowning on air. Then he saw it. A German shepherd hanging from a pine branch near the river, hind paws scrambling at frozen emptiness. The knife shook in his hand, not from the cold, but from the ghost feel of cutting a harness in Fallujah. Now, the blade bit under a different rope. He had been walking the riverside path with the heavy steps of a man carrying invisible burdens. At 46, his shoulders had a permanent slope. He lived alone in his grandfather's cabin. The cabin's silence never stayed quiet. It always let the memories from Afghanistan back in. The dog's amber eyes, wide with bottomless terror, locked onto his. A note flapped on its collar. Jack's numb fingers smoothed it open. His name is Ranger. Too damaged. Forgive me. The world narrowed to the rope, the steel, and the dying animal. Easy, boy. I've got you, Jack whispered, his voice rough from disuse. He sheathed his knife, hauled himself up the slick trunk, and sawed at the taut rope. Fibers popped. At Bonds Unspoken, we believe every heartwarming story, whether between humans or their animal companion, deserves to be told and heard. If you agree, please like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you can join us every time another bond speaks louder than words. With a final jerk, it snapped. Ranger fell. Jack tumbled after him. The dog convulsed on the frosty earth, sucking in ragged, tearing gulps of air. Jack crawled forward and gathered the shuddering animal against his chest. The dog's fur was matted with mud and ice. As he held the shuddering dog, a hollow place under Jack's ribs he thought was permanent suddenly didn't feel so empty. Breathe. It's over, Jack murmured, stroking the coarse fur. He lifted the heavy, limp dog. The walk back to the cabin was a mile against the wind. The weight in his arms was alive, breathing warm air against his neck. As he trudged home, his own breathing synced with Ranger's. Steady, purposeful. Inside the cabin, Jack laid Ranger on a worn blanket by the fireplace. He cleaned the raw rope burn on the dog's neck, his hands now steady. Ranger blinked slowly, watching him. The fire crackled, pushing back the deep cold of the room. Night fell. With it came the darkness Jack feared most, the one inside. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The quiet pressed in. Then the memories roared back. Sand gunfire, a friend falling. He woke with a strangled gasp, heart pounding, searching the dark room for an enemy that wasn't there. He heard a soft scrape on the floor. Ranger, weak and trembling, had dragged himself across the boards. The dog laid his head on Jack's boot, a warm weight. His amber eyes lifted. Jack's hand hovered, then settled on the dog's head. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here." Ranger let out a deep, rattling sigh. The sound of a creature finally allowed to stop fighting. In the firelight, two mismatched breaths slowly found the same rhythm. Outside, the valley was cold and empty. Inside, for the first time in years, Jack Mercer did not feel completely alone. But outside, the wind was already erasing their tracks. The man who had tied that noose would soon remember the dog he'd tried to throw away. And what would he do when he did? The morning after the rescue, a pale light filtered through the cabin windows. Jack moved with quiet purpose, preparing a bowl of warm broth for Ranger. The dog ate slowly, each swallow a deliberate act of trust. His amber eyes never left Jack. An hour later, Jack's old Chevrolet truck bumped along the county road toward town. Ranger lay on a blanket in the passenger seat, breathing in shaky pulls. Every jolt made him wince, but he didn't protest. His gaze, clouded with pain but clear with trust, followed Jack's every move. "Almost there, buddy," Jack whispered, the words more for himself. The Iron Creek Animal Clinic was a modest, red-roofed building. Dr. Ellen Shaw met them at the door, in her late 50s, with silver hair and a practical knot. Her eyes held the calm of someone who had seen every kind of hurt. They softened when they landed on Ranger. "Let's have a look," she said, her voice low and even. Her skilled hands traced the brutal rope burn, then parted the fur to reveal older, welt-like scars crisscrossing his back. Her lips pressed into a thin line. This wasn't a one-time thing. He survived beating, starvation, and a hanging that should have been the end. She listened to his heart, then looked up, her stethoscope still cold against Ranger's fur. But his heart, it's a drum. This dog wants to live. Jack's shoulders dropped a full inch, a breath he'd been holding for days finally leaving his lungs. The clinic door chimed. A woman entered with a young girl of about 7. The girl, Lily, had her hair in 2 pale braids and held a rabbit carrier carefully. Her mother's eyes went wide with fear the second she saw Ranger. "That's the dog from the woods," she whispered, pulling Lily back. "Stay away from it." But Lily didn't retreat. Her blue eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a deep, intuitive sadness. She set her carrier down and took one careful step forward. "Lily, no," her mother warned. The girl reached out a small, trembling hand. Ranger, who had tensed at the new voices, went still. He lowered his head, not in submission, but in a gesture of weary acknowledgement. His nose, cold and wet, brushed her fingertips. A fragile smile broke across Lily's face. "He's not mean, Mama," she whispered. "He's just hurting." The room fell into a profound, gentle silence. Dr. Shaw looked from the girl to Jack, an understanding passing between them. "You see," she said softly, "he's no monster. He's a survivor. He endured the cruelty. He didn't let it turn him cruel." Jack swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. He didn't give up. As if an answer, Ranger leaned his full weight against Jack's leg. It was just a shift, but it was enough to steady them both. Jack rested his hand on the dog's broad back. For the first time in years, a small, solid warmth kindled in the cold hollow of his chest. He paid the bill and guided Ranger back to the truck. The winter sun was a little brighter now. "We're going home," Jack said, helping Ranger onto the seat. "And this time you're safe." But as they drove out of the clinic parking lot, a different truck, old and rusted blue, pulled in. The man behind the wheel didn't get out. He just watched them leave, his thumb tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the steering wheel. A decision was hardening in his gut. The bond between man and dog became a quiet rhythm. Ranger's wounds healed into jagged pink lines, and his ribs slowly vanished under a healthy layer of muscle and fur. For Jack, the cabin was no longer just a shelter from the world, but a place of shared, silent understanding. Ranger's steady presence became a living anchor, pulling Jack back from the edge of his own memories. One brittle afternoon, Jack took Ranger for a walk along the outskirts of town, near a small neighborhood park. The air was sharp with impending snow. Children's laughter, thin and bright, echoed from the playground. A young boy, maybe 7, chased a soccer ball with reckless joy, his mother watching from a bench with tired eyes. The ball bounced away, rolling down a slope and into the quiet street. The boy, Daniel, sprinted after it without looking. Jack Soldier's eyes saw the danger first. An old, blue pickup truck rattling around the corner, its tires slipping on gravel. Jack's shout died in his throat. Ranger was already a black and tan blur, shoulders slamming into boy, both tumbling into grass, as the truck's fender swept the air where the child had been. The vehicle skidded to a stop, the driver's face pale behind the windshield. Silence, then chaos. Daniel's mother screamed, running to scoop up her sobbing, scrape-kneed son. Neighbors emerged from houses. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs as he ran forward. Ranger stood between the boy and the tire marks on the asphalt, body rigid, head low, breast puffing in sharp clouds. The old scars on his neck stood out in the cold light, but his expression was not one of fear. It was fierce protection. He looked at Jack, as if unsure whether he'd done right or wrong. "He saved him," the mother whispered, clutching her son. Tears streamed down her face. "That dog saved my boy." The murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. "Isn't that the dog they found hanging?" "It is. He just saved a child's life." The mother approached Ranger, her hands open. "Thank you," she breathed. Ranger's stiff posture softened. He ducked his head and gently licked a tear from her cheek. In that moment, the community's perception shifted. The dangerous dog was gone, replaced by a hero. The fear in people's eyes melted into awe and gratitude. Jack felt a warmth behind his own eyes, a thawing of something long frozen. Later, as a winter dusk settled, Jack knelt beside Ranger in the cabin. He ran his hand over the dog's head, tracing the line of his skull. "You did good," he murmured, his voice thick. "Better than I ever did." Ranger's tail gave a slow, heavy thump on the floor. But in the quiet of the evening, as Jack stared into the fire, a cold thought intruded on the warmth of the day. The story was spreading, and the man who had written Ranger off as too damaged would hear it. He would know the dog he'd tried to kill was not only alive, but celebrated. Pride was a dangerous thing, and a man's shame could become a man with nothing left to lose, especially a man who still had the other end of that rope. The hard snow started at dusk, blurring the world into a silent, white void. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled. Jack stirred a mug of coffee, watching Ranger sleep peacefully by the hearth. The knock, when it came, was a blunt, ugly sound against a wooden door. Ranger's head lifted, ears pitched forward, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Jack opened the door to a wall of swirling snow and the gaunt, angry face of Darrell Hodge. The man's eyes were red-rimmed, his coat hanging open. "Mercer," he rasped. "The smell of cheap whiskey, and what will hit Jack in a wave. I hear my dog's a hero now." "He's not your dog," Jack said, his voice flat and final. "Not anymore." "He's property," Darrell snarled, his voice rising. "My property. I want him back." "You stole him." His gaze shot past Jack, landing on Ranger, who had risen to his feet, tense and silent. "What you did wasn't training. It was torture. He's not going anywhere with you." Darrell's face twisted with rage. "Last warning. Bring him to me or I'll take him." He took a threatening step forward. Jack closed the door in his face, the solid thud period at the end of the sentence. For a few heartbeats, there was only the howl of the wind. Then the side window exploded inward. A rock skittered across the floor, followed by a blast of snow in Darrell's arm, groping blindly through the shattered frame for Ranger's collar. "Come air, mutt!" Darrell bellowed. Ranger yelped, scrambling back, paws slipping on glass. The shatter of glass became the crack of rifle fire. The snow swirling to the window became desert sand. For one fractured second, Jack wasn't in his cabin. He was back in the wadi, his friend falling. His vision tunneled, his breath locked in his throat. He saw Darrell's hand close on Ranger's collar and pull. Jack moved on a raw, shattered instinct. "Stop." The shout tore from a place of pure terror. And that's when Ranger moved. He didn't attack the arm. He surged forward and planted himself bodily between Jack and the broken window, his back to Jack, his teeth bared in a thunderous, warning growl. "Protector." Darrell, yanking from an awkward angle, lost his balance. His boots slid on the icy porch, and he toppled backward into the snow with a furious cry. Lights flicked on in neighboring houses. Old Walter Flynn from down the road appeared with a shotgun, not raised, but held ready. "Trouble, Jack?" By the time the sheriff's truck arrived, the fight had bled out of Darrell Hodge, extinguished by the cold and the witnesses. He was charged with trespassing, destruction of property, and cruelty to animals. As the sheriff led him away, Darrell cast one last, hollow look at Ranger, who stood solidly beside Jack in the doorway. Jack shut the door on the storm. He sank to his knees, his forehead touching Ranger's. "You did good," he whispered, his voice raw. "You don't have to fight anymore. Just stay. Just stay with me." He held the dog there in the dark cabin, the wind moaning through the broken window, two battered souls who had just defended their fragile sanctuary. The external threat was gone, but Jack knew the final battle wasn't against a man with a rope or a rock. It was a quieter war believing they deserved this peace. A thin winter sun broke over Iron Creek, painting the snow in pale gold. Jack drove the old Chevrolet toward a place he'd only heard about, the Forward March Canine Center. Beside him, Ranger sat upright, a calm, solid presence. The dog's transformation was complete. His coat was full, his eyes clear, his bearing one of quiet dignity. The center was a compound of weathered timber pens and a large training hall, a place built on the idea that sometimes the best medicine has four legs and a heartbeat. Veterans in heavy coats moved slowly between the enclosures, their postures familiar to Jack. They carried the same invisible weight. Jack was nervous. Bringing Ranger here felt like exposing a sacred, private miracle. But healing, he was starting to understand, didn't come from hiding light. It came from sharing it. Inside the hall, a group of veterans sat in a loose circle. Among them was Kyle Reed, a Marine in his late 20s. The staff had told Jack that Kyle hadn't spoken in months. A man locked behind a door of his own making. He sat with his shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. Ranger, off-leash, moved without prompting. He walked directly to Kyle and sat not too close but present. Kyle flinched, his hand twitching. Minutes stretched out, silent and heavy. Then, slowly, Kyle lifted a trembling hand. His fingers touched Ranger's fur, then curled into it, gripping as if it were a lifeline. His shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release. A sound escaped Kyle, a ragged half-sob, half-sigh, as if a wire pulled taut across his chest had finally snapped. "I haven't been able to breathe like that in a long time," Kyle whispered, his voice rough from disuse. Jack turned away, a warm, painful swell of emotion tightening his throat. He saw other veterans tentatively approach. One man rested his forehead against Ranger's neck. Another simply sat beside him, their silence a shared language. Ranger accepted it all, a steady anchor in the room's turbulent sea. At dusk, Jack and Ranger climbed the hill above the valley. The wind swept clean across the snowfield. Below, the lights of the center and the town began to twinkle in the deep blue evening. Jack pulled a worn leather journal from his coat. He wrote slowly, the cold making the ink stubborn, giving weight to each word. They called him a monster. They left him for dead. But he saved a child. He saved me. Today, I watch him save men who thought they were beyond saving. He isn't the dog the world tried to throw away. He is the miracle of Iron Creek. He closed the book. Ranger leaned against his leg, a warm, living pressure. Jack looked out at the vast, quiet land, then down at the dog whose amber eyes reflected the last of the sun. "We made it, buddy," he said softly. The dog's tail gave one slow, sweeping wag through the snow. Two figures on a hill. One man the world had passed by. One dog the world had discarded. Now anchored each other more firmly than mountains. Their story wasn't about being saved. It was about choosing, every day, to save each other. The only sound was the wind over snow and the soft, steady rhythm of a dog's breath, a sound like a promise kept. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bonds Unspoken. Every click helps us share more incredible moments that celebrate the bond between humans and animals. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds us what true loyalty feels like.